Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Mel Hauser, I use she, they pronouns. I'm the executive director of All Brains Belong. Welcome to Brain Club. Let me share screen. I'll get us oriented to our conversation. So we are continuing our series on dysregulation in different settings. And for the next 2 weeks, we're going to do a part one, part two about when work dysregulates you. Before we begin, closed captions are enabled. You just have to turn them on at your end if you'd like to use them. Depending on your version of Zoom, you might see the live transcript closed captioning icon. If not, look for the more ... and choose show subtitles. You can also do the same and choose hide subtitles if you want to turn them off. If you're new to All Brains Belong, welcome or welcome back to the rest of the community. So we're a nonprofit organization supporting the health and belonging of people with all types of brains, and one of the ways we do that is Brain Club. Brain Club is our weekly education program for demonstrating our approach to neuro-inclusive culture for purposes of shifting broader community awareness of the issues of concern and importance to our community, and to promote new ways of thinking and being together in community. With therefore the idea is that you go forth into your life and carry it forward, but that's how culture change happens. Everybody's welcome at Brain Club. Brain Club's for neurodivergent people, people who support neurodivergent people, people who are exploring their neuroidentity, and anyone with any type of brain who wants to learn about neuroinclusive culture. This is a place where we provide education and modeling of ways of being in community through panels, guest speakers, and book chats to provide a way of better understanding the experiences of our presenters through their stories. And for many, this is a way to feel less alone. Along the way, you will often hear us criticizing systems that make it difficult for people to get their needs met, and certainly that will come up today. And we also bright spot alternatives. This is not the right place for answering individual questions or individual needs or giving medical advice. It's a place where we come to learn and unlearn together. Feel free to use the chat as we go, and feel free to participate however works for you. You can have your video on or off. Even if it's on, we don't expect anything of you. Feel free to walk around or fidget or stim or eat or take breaks. Observation is also a valid form of participation. We invite you to listen, to learn, to observe our neuro-inclusive space, and maybe pick up some words and concepts. Lizzie's going to put a link in the chat to our Brain Club digital resource library. But also you can just ask in the chat if you hear us use a word that is new to you, and think about what you hear, how it connects to your life. If it's your first time at Brain Club, keep coming back. Lizzie's going to put some frequently asked questions in the chat, but it might take a couple times to figure out the flow. Couple of quick announcements. First, we are always so grateful to our Brain Club supporters who make it possible to be here week after week, sharing education to make the community around us more inclusive for people with all types of brains. Brain Club a few weeks ago launched in podcast format. So not all Brain Club episodes will become podcasts, but on the second and fourth Fridays of the month, you can look out for Brain Club podcast episodes. There was a new one last Friday. And if you missed our third annual Everything's Connected to Everything webinar, you can still get the recording. Lizzie's going to put the link in the chat if you have not gotten it yet. All right, here we go. We're continuing our conversation about nervous system dysregulation because there's a lot of people who are dysregulated at work. What we know is that autistic adults are 2.5 to 8 times more likely to be unemployed or underemployed, and that 75% of ADHD adults experience employment-related challenges. And we know that employment and health are bidirectionally related. So what we're going to do is we're going to watch a pre-recorded segment with some background information, setting the stage for our panel presentation. We're going to run a little bit over today. Hope you don't mind. Feel free to leave whenever you want to. While we watch the panel, you are welcome to use the chat to ask questions or comment about the content of the panel. You can share how what a panelist says impacts you. You can validate others' comments. You can ask questions. We just ask that if you're going to use the chat, please use the big box instead of the reply threads. It makes it a lot easier for me to read with the reply threads. The chat bounces up and down, and that is hard for me to keep up with. So thank you for using the big box. Thank you to our panelists, Sarah Knudsen, Nat May, Teo Rodas, Cecilia Puleo, and Vicky Sunny. Let me switch to my other screen and we will start. We will start. So that does not appear loud enough. I forgot that Zoom doesn't let me adjust my volume while I'm in share screen. Let's try that again. What I would say is that especially for those who have not been to Brain Club before, and or maybe All Brains Belong is new to you too. So we're an organization that is trying to make life better for neurodivergent people across the lifespan. And it was very clear to us when we launched a year and a half ago that to do anything for the neurodivergent community, we have to do everything, because it would have been, okay to open a medical practice. That's one of the things that we do. But you have to change the world. So in addition to educating the broader community around neuroinclusivity, we have employment support programs, and we help people access their education, we help people make friends. So because these are all part of health. And when we think about employment, there are a lot of people who do not have their access needs met by the defaults of society. The defaults of healthcare, you must pick up the phone to become a new patient, the defaults of the education system, you must sit in the chair, you must sit still for 8 hours. The defaults of workplaces, there are lots of defaults at a lot of different workplaces, right? So when we think about access, anything that someone needs for full participation, there are a lot of different types of access needs, and so therefore a lot of opportunities to be thwarted. And what happens often is that the person doesn't recognize that it's their access needs being thwarted. They internalize that there's something wrong or broken about themselves a lot of the time. So one of the things that we do often at Brain Club is try to unlearn that and break that down. And so when we think about neurodivergence and employment, the consequences of large numbers of neurodivergent people not having their access needs met in the workplace is that autistic adults are 2.5 to 8 times more likely to be unemployed or underemployed. And 75% at least of ADHDers experience employment-related challenges as well. What we know is that, we're always thinking about health as a community health organization. Employment and health are inextricably linked. Unemployment increases the probability of developing a chronic health condition by 83%. And employment at any level has a huge impact on reducing mental distress. And we could think about all of the reasons for that, the financial aspects of that, the psychological impact of that. And when we think about inclusion, we talk a lot here about all of the ways in which humans are marginalized and othered, and how, especially if you have many aspects of your identity that are marginalized and othered, there's that intersectional impact of that marginalization. And so when we think about the intersectional experiences of being marginalized in employment, this becomes even more problematic. We looked at this graphic at our last Brain Club, looking at, and this comes from the Vermont Department of Health, looking at how all of these things connect to health, all of the social inequities, which interrelate with the institutional inequities, which of course impact people's living conditions. I'm just going to zoom in and make it bigger. There we go.
So there's just all of these things which impact health. And then when you also throw in, so here we are, we're going to be, when we, I'll get to class in a second, but when we think about these social inequities, which are going to have a huge impact on like the systemic barriers to all of these things that connect to health, and then we also thwart people's ability to access healthcare, we see a lot of problems. What we don't want is we don't want the square peg being hammered to fit into the round hole. And that is what happens so often for all kinds of people. In the book, Parenting for Social Justice, and this is the book I referenced earlier, we have one of the co-authors is coming to present at Brain Club next week. Class is described as a relative social hierarchical ranking. Another way of looking at that might be similar roles in the economic system. It might be cultural knowledge, skills, networks, and all of these variables with all of the other ways in which people are marginalized plays out. And so, in thinking about this as a combination of access to resources, your relationship to work, all of these many reasons that impact how much you feel like you belong and whether you have power. And there's so many power imbalances in any given situation. I'm going to quote from Parenting for Social Justice. So Jamie Lynn Castle describes what economic oppression has felt like for her. We were drowning in a river of stress, trying to swim through it and mostly failing. The shame and guilt that I carried with me over how society viewed me simply because of my circumstances was extremely heavy. When I've been completely stressed out worrying financially, my brain just couldn't work efficiently. It took so much energy just to exist. And so with that, I'm going to introduce our community panel. It was really important to us here to have many different fields of employment, many different types of jobs represented in this community panel. So we have someone who works in food service, construction, law, social services, childcare, and all the many different types of employment status represented. And so anyway, I all this background context just for like a lens to be thinking through as we watch this panel. I am going to stop share. I'm going to actually look at the chat. And I am going to open up our video. I'm one of the ways that I support my motor planning differences is talking through all of the sequencing steps. So don't mind me. Okay, here we go. Did I click the sound? I don't remember. So I'm gonna do it again. I did. All right, here we go.
What have you seen in your workplace or in workplaces that you've worked in about how working conditions impact health?
I work food service jobs. I'm a baker. So all of my jobs have been in kitchens. The things that I've found that impact health conditions the most are the practices in food service around scheduling. I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase in school, the bell doesn't release you, I release you.
in early education, before the pandemic hit, people were struggling. It was a field that was already really kind of hemorrhaging people. It was really suffering. Here we were open 10 and a half hours every day for children. And so teachers were required to be here on either end of that too. So like for an administrator, I would be here for at least 12 hours a day. But so we kind of walked into that scenario and then worked to even just maintain it, just to keep it going, keep the machine going.
Mentality where it's like, I know it said 9 on your sheet, but you're here until it's done. um, and because food service tends to pay less than a lot of fields, it can be very, very dangerous to try and set boundaries in situations like that. So
Because we need it. I mean, these are human lives that we're taking care of, so we need to be here. We need people covering. We need the proper legal ratios of adult to child. So we were less flexible with people's schedules, longer hours. We had more kids. We really kind of, when we came in, we filled the rooms because that's like the business model. Of course, like more kids equals more money coming in. So we had more kids in rooms, larger group sizes, and fewer teachers.
Yeah, I mean, it ended up being sort of, we're just doing everything we can to survive.
What have you seen in your workplace about how working conditions impact health?
I mean, I think it impacts health in terms of stressors, and I think there's like in a lot of ways there's a ton of them. There's like social stressors, conflict with coworkers and supervisors. There's performance stressors, understanding tasks and executing them. There's productivity stress. Can I meet the output and production expectations in the time that's allotted with the energy that I can sustainably access? There's logistical stressors. I'm working during preset hours with a schedule that's often set by somebody else at varying locations for varying durations, varying activities, varying obligations. So if I'm a person that has emotional or executive functioning or motor patterning or attention or energy challenges or unpredictable sleep patterns, all of that can make keeping track of schedules, having the energy to follow schedules, being able to get to the right place at the right time with the right supplies, um, and and um, and perform consistently during the hours of obligation. Really difficult if my body clock and my energy vary widely, along with my ability to plan um, and anticipate needs and concentrate and pay attention.
I have a brain that means that I really, really need to know what's going to happen before I go and do something. And it becomes extremely dysregulating for me and for a lot of other people who I've worked with when we can't have like even a ballpark of like how many hours we're going to be working, what that shift is going to look like, how many people are going to be there, whether everyone else is going to show up, because those are all common concerns in the field that I work in. And the uncertainty of that makes me dysregulated to an extent that it's like, okay, I said I could do these things and I could be responsible for these tasks, but I am not fully present anymore. So it's a lot less physically safe for me to be, lifting the 50-pound bags of flour or operating the heavy machine, trying to cut this thing super fast because my understanding of my body has gone from like 30% to 0% because it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel, my needs don't feel relevant to my safety and my environment anymore. So I am not going to think about whether I'm too warm. I'm not going to think about whether I'm thirsty. I'm not going to think about whether I need to sit down for 5 minutes and eat something. I'm just going to do it until it's done and I can be done being here.
Like supervisory stress. And so how to be a person who highly values autonomy, like a lot of us are, the PDA stuff, persistent desire for autonomy. So how do I be in a workplace and a person who consistently values autonomy and needs to understand why someone else's way is better in order to really get myself to do it in an environment where basically unquestioning or minimally questioning compliance is expected. So
something that I really struggle with is like, there's social cues and then there's the social cues of capitalism. And those are like, you can't find out, like once you find out like the motivation behind what someone is telling you, it's like you have to do the like, what is the hardest thing in the world to me, and just accept that the answer is just because. Like, I need to know why something is happening, why something does something, and it's very, very hard for me to be like, it just is that way, and you need to not think about it for a while. And part of that motivation that like drives all business is like not wanting people to know that they have to ask certain questions or have to advocate for themselves in certain ways, and certain jobs making it much, much more risky to like try and enter into those negotiations. So I've been in situations where I'm being like dramatically underpaid because I did not know that everyone else around me was getting like the salaries that they were getting from a place of like, I've been doing this, that, and the other that is beyond the job description I signed on for. It is time for you to pay me more money because I am doing more labor for you.
There's been times in that where, like, it's my turn to talk or relate something or engage in the conversation. And um, I want to make a point. I have a point to make. And then I start getting the sense from the facilitator that, like, that person, he or she will cut me off, or kind of like, I get the sense moving along, and which I think, because I also suffer from some low self-esteem, I think, which is an outcome of my ADHD. So then I'm suddenly like in this loop where I'm like, well, maybe what I have to say is not of interest, and it's really just, I think that in that kind of environment, there's a lot of pressure on getting to the point and letting the rest of the group engage, and I certainly want to fit into that, trying to, I guess, sort of navigate within that framework that is the framework that is mostly dictated by neurotypical people, right?
Right. And so there's also this element of a neuro inclusive space would involve a facilitator that like lays out ground rules about there's no right way to participate. There's no right way to communicate, and like explicitly naming that, that's not what most groups do.
Kitchens have. But also, like, I'm transgender, and part of that was that I recently had I experienced chest dysphoria, and so for a long time I was binding my chest, and that meant that like not only is it super dysregulating to work in more than 8-hour day, but doing that results in like stabbing rib pains that may or may not you after surgery. So part of it was like I had to have surgery, and that was a medical necessity for me, like regardless of how it impacted my mental health. And like accessing other forms of gender affirming healthcare were really, really imperative to me. And that's not going to be the case for every trans person, but like I think that's definitely like a consideration as kitchens tend to attract multiply marginalized people, because I've been in a lot of kitchens with other trans folks, with other neurodivergent folks, where it's like, okay, so these expectations are built around cis bodies and one neurotype. And my body actually can't be here for 12 hours. Otherwise I start having heart palpitations.
So, and then you add on top of that the personal life stressors that can come up, and any of those things, one can have difficulty. I can have difficulty managing, become dysregulated. The hyper focus means that I tend to get and stay distracted from work. Those are all stressors, and then once I get like any of those stressors, that can start to lead, that it goes unresolved, can lead to, it really gets me into a vicious cycle of a dysregulation spiral. So I get stressed out, I get anxious, that which leads to mental and physical tension. I go into defensive behaviors, worry, self-protective avoidance, distraction. There's dysregulation, including sleep, which leads to less capacity for attention, less capacity for motor skills and motor planning, less executive functioning. which then can lead to more and bigger mistakes, hyperfocus, getting stuck on the wrong details, self-justification, externalizing blame, attacking perceived sources of threat, all of which go over really well in a work environment, leading to more negative feedback, possible discipline, job loss, bad reviews that limit my potential to advance and my potential for access to organizational power and privilege that could actually help me fix the problems that are affecting me. And then all of that leads to more dysregulation, less resilience, greater vulnerability to that, the tendency to hyperfocus, which is consistent for a lot of us with ADHD and autism. And it's a superpower when it comes to focusing on job related tasks, but it's a liability if there's a stressor. Um, because and that's troubling because then it becomes difficult to think about anything or do anything else until that stressor is resolved. And so unless there's an ability to resolve issues of concern, the hyperfocus tends to really get in the way of the things that that employers are looking for. So
When my needs aren't met, but me asking to have my needs met is going to be penalized.
Remember when I was working at a childcare center, my position was as a floater, which meant that I didn't know what was needed of me or expected of me or what my day was going to look like until I was there. And I remember having a big conversation with my boss and being like, okay, this next year around, I can't handle this, and I feel that my showing up here, my attendance, and being a good employee is being impacted when I don't know what's expected of me. We had this big long talk, and then she like reformatted it that floaters would be assigned to specific rooms, so you would have at least know where you were going to be, who you were going to be working with, and everything. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. And then I remember having, oh, and it like, oh man, it puts a little ache in my chest. I remember feeling so like proud of that and everything. And then walking by and hearing someone be like, you mean I have to do the same thing every day? And I was like, oh my gosh, I just ruined that person's life. Like now that person is going to have to do the same thing every day. And it's all my fault. Cause you know, I have a control over all of their feelings.
So a couple of things that are standing out for me listening to this part of your story. One is it's a story of unmet access needs being anything that someone needs for full, meaningful participation. So you needed novelty, you needed multiple different things in the day, you needed multiple locations, you needed movement, you know, you needed variety, like all of this. And so that was unmet. Another thing I heard from your story was it's a story of interdependence. Like I think independence is so overly glorified. Autonomy is really important, but the idea that like you don't need other people, interdependence, being connected to, relying on other people, like how profoundly human is that? And so anyway, that's I'm also I'm also hearing that from your story. And that, you know, in the team that you're leading now, that you are bringing this lens of whether you're using this term or not, you're thinking about access needs and how to help the people that you're leading have met access needs. And like, you know, I think there's a lot of small businesses that struggle with like hiring good people and keeping people and like all the lost revenue of turnover and all the things, right? When you train a new person, like when people have their access needs, they are less likely to quit their jobs.
For sure. Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, it's just not a one size fits all.
Not just because it was in childcare typically at that time, I think like a revolving door staffing wise. I mean, people were really burning out. It was a recipe for burnout, stress, fatigue. We couldn't actually do our jobs. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it ended up being sort of we're just doing everything we can to survive.
What strategies have you found helpful to cope with unhealthy work environments?
when I started to write these down, it was sort of an off the cuff. I started to kind of laugh, and I sort of thought, well, I just am being like, you know, kind of off the cuff and sarcastic. But I actually think these are actually the strategies I use, which kind of says something. like saving enough money to quit or take extended leaves of absence, getting healthcare professionals in my court so I can qualify for continued health insurance under the family medical leave absence or temporary permanent disability when I do leave. Structuring my life simply enough that if I need to quit, I can get government benefits. Structuring my income so I can earn just enough to afford rent and still qualify for food stamps, heating oil, and Medicaid. Researching ways to house myself if I end up homeless. Self-employment, to get to give myself maximum freedom and independence.
I think there's a lot of people who are in work situations that are not working for their brains. How did you come to start your business?
I worked in a corporate traditional architecture practice setting for almost 20 years. I started working, I went to architecture school, night school for architecture. So successful, but my own measure, I felt like I wasn't actually doing anything. And I had a really tough time sitting at a desk. um, and so, so I looked for opportunities to basically get out of the office. Well, I bought a house and I'd started to do work on it. So I'd go into the office in the morning and then I got to go, I can only put in a half day today, and I'd leave and I had all my equipment set up and I'd climb out the bedroom window and put shingles up on the side of the house. And that was like super, it was just so fulfilling to me. I basically started the construction business. And the reason for that was people would drive by the house when I was working on it and they'd stop and they'd be like, I need somebody to re-shingle my house. And so that's how I got into doing construction. Yeah. So I'm completely self-taught when it comes to estimating and that whole side of, I'm trained as an architect. So the design part of it is very manageable, but and the practice has been through some ups and downs.
Changing careers. I mean, literally, as I like in my 30s, my mental capacity to really do the grind of law started to massively decrease, and I just couldn't cognitively sustain 60 or 80-hour weeks of being mentally on. And so I switched to sort of a mental health and then eventually more peer support, which drew a lot more on experiential and empathic capacities, and I didn't have to use my problem solving abilities like 16 hours a day, and that was much and that's been a much better path for me.
There's a lot of pressure in a kind of business, environment, small business, whatever, to move things along, get to the point, set the table and let my team delegate. So that's where it sometimes it gets in the way of, not that I don't think that I'm have learned to be pretty good about delegating, but sometimes it just takes me a long time to get there. So I made the decision to myself that I needed a business partner that could sort of ground the business in the things that I didn't have, or that I couldn't bring to the table.
Kind of worked through to figure out like what I need to prioritize in a job in the hiring process is if I can avoid it, I won't take jobs where I can't wear headphones. And because for me, music is my like number one self-regulation technique. And it helps to block out the sound of air vents and convection ovens, which is super overwhelming to me. So one of the questions that I always ask on like an interview or a training day is like, okay, how many other people are going to be in the kitchen with me? Will I need to be super alert to people like passing through the kitchen? Can I bring headphones or earbuds in with me? I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't love it. a lot of people get siloed into food service as like a tool of marginalization of like, we're going to shove you back here and underpay you where no one can see you for 20 years. But you know, it's cool that I get to like go to work every day and I know that what I'm doing. Like what I do is feed people. I make food for people to eat that makes them full or makes them happy. Or makes them frustrated and gives them something to complain about to the other people that they got breakfast with. But like I know that the job that I'm doing is necessary for like human beings and that it often adds extra joy to people's lives. And I know that when I leave the building, my work is done. I'm not worried about like I missed something. I'm not worried about like, is this take home work going to take me like the amount of time that I thought it would? I like my time once I leave the building is mine.
What do you wish other employers knew about creating healthy workplace culture?
Exactly. And so the pandemic actually was helpful in the sense for us that we reevaluated, like, wait, is this working for us? And we're able to reflect on some observations we had and say, actually, that's not working for us. And really be like, wait a sec, what are we doing and why? And then can that change based on what we want to be doing? And one of the things we wanted to be doing was less of a revolving door, more retention in our staff, because we know that consistency of care will also provide a better foundation for the children if it's these same teachers and those same colleagues working together.
And we know people want to be here, and so the question is, what do you need to be here? Like, what is it that you need in order to be doing this job that you love or that you want to be doing?
So before we connected with Mel and All Brains Belong, before even knowing about the term access needs, we were sort of asking folks what their access needs were to be able to show up and feel good about the work that they were doing. Because people were kind of showing up, but it wasn't feeling good, you know. And so to feel good in your work and to show up was really important. And it just was a lot of conversation, individual conversations, conversations as a whole staff to determine sort of what we needed and really making space for those voices to be heard. And so it wasn't that Vicky and I were saying, this is what people need, you know, as sort of part of the leadership team. It was really asking those people to tell us, because we can make tons of assumptions, but a lot of those tend to be inaccurate. And so that was I just want to emphasize how important that piece was for us in the process.
Well, and we learned, particular to the pandemic, we learned that a lot of people didn't have a primary care doctor or didn't have health insurance, including some of the admin team. And so we became, in a sense, especially Cecilia, like resource coordinators. And we would have on the clock, you know, during the work week, we still do this. We have time with people who need, because you're working Monday through Friday, but that's when everything's open and you have to make your phone calls. And so we have time for people to connect with one of us, usually Cecilia, to like call Vermont Health Connect and figure out health insurance, or to call the health advocates, or to call and find a
emergency
therapist.
housing, find a therapist.
Food, access to food. Yeah, so those kinds of things. We just had to learn more about people's individual struggles and individual situations, and also then the collective needs of like, what are the barriers to doing the work that we want to do?
And we really want to go against the rhetoric that like everything should be done in isolation by yourself. And so that's also a way that we open that up to say, let's do this together, because, you know, health insurance, for example, doesn't make sense to a lot of us. So if we can work together and support each other, that feels better for everyone.
So I use this like a to-do list app kind of thing. Like, just, they're not task reminders, they're reminders to me, either my brain or my business owner. And one of the things is, you know, this pops up every morning at when I'm starting work. It is good leaders offer opportunity for growth, but as importantly, they also understand unique needs of the people they are leading. So, you know, for me, that's like that's what I had to, when I recognized that, it was because I recognized like that was my own situation, you know? So it makes sense that, like, if I can't expect myself to be kind of, you know, neurotypical, then there's a likelihood that all my staff is not, like, nobody's neurotypical, right? You know, so there is no such thing as that.
Absolutely agree. It's just the assumptions or the cultural beliefs that people grow up with. Like you're a little kid and you're basically taught there is one correct default way to be a person, and it's
Mm.
nonsense.
We have a lot of trade partners, subcontractors, material suppliers, and stuff like that. And it is so, we are so dependent, you know, um, and um, and we try to have a framework of expectation for certain things, because you know it can't be just a total free for all, but at the same time, like, there's like our plaster that does almost all the board and plaster on our jobs. um, he's a single dad. He manages, you know, the business financial end of his business. He's got a couple of staff. Um, he also stocks like the job sites, his job sites every morning, you know. So so I know just over the years that we're not likely to get a quote, but we've talked and we know enough, that we know what his pricing is. So you know, we make some accommodations there, and then you know he's gonna send me a message on, usually, you know, maybe Thursday. Can I get a check? You know, and
That's really tricky. And what I'm hearing from you is this awareness of like the whole of a person. You know, so you mentioned, you know, this person's a single dad and they're doing this and they're doing that and you're even thinking about them as the character in their own movie of their own business, which, I mean, that's the way that my brain took your story and translated it. And I'm picturing the guy, and he's doing all the things and he's delivering this anyway, and he's got the kids. Anyway, like you're seeing that, and think about so many people are not giving a character like that the right time of day.
yeah, for sure. Um, I think, and the challenge, it hasn't been easy to stay in business because because it takes time that's not necessarily, and that that kind of investment is not what our system is set up to reward by, you know, uh, making enough money to keep the doors open. But
Right, especially when you've got, as you've described, you need a team, an interdependent team to run the business. And then when you're responsible for the livelihoods of other people, I mean, I feel it too. It's just a lot of
mm,
pressure.
it is a lot of pressure. Yeah, yeah, because you do feel responsible for your team and your trade partners and your vendors and their families and their communities, and you know it's yeah, you that interdependence is, it's all about community.
What do you wish other employers knew about creating a healthy workplace culture?
That it's not enough to fix problems as they come up. You have to think about the people who are working for you, the people who might work for you, the things you might not know about the people who are working for you, and whether or not there is already space for them to work comfortably and healthily in that environment. And I think that like that is something that's like really under considered, and that like a lot of the time that leaves room for people to um create ableist and classist practices, and couch them in language of non-discrimination. And that if you really think about like, okay, could this kind of person who experiences these kinds of marginalization walk in here and feel like they could commit to this job. Like, would they be able to do it? Would they be able to account for their safety and their health? Would they feel comfortable knowing that they would not be fired for being trans or for being a person of color, and have it like couched in some other terminology? Like, what can I do to make sure that this place is not only safe but like has space built in for people who are not like the normative cishet white man model that we built the 40-hour work week around. And that, like, if you aren't seeing a group or several groups of people represented in your workplace, that is because you made it a space that they could not show up to. You either like are advertising for employment in the wrong channels, you are not offering enough money, you are letting your employees say microaggressive ignorant stuff that they don't know about, you are expecting your employees to be able to do things with their bodies that they don't necessarily have to do.
I really think we need to reimagine work. I mean, I think it's bigger than just. I mean, certainly think that there's ways that employers can be sensitive to a variety of stressors and sort of, do this universal design thing, but it still doesn't get away from the power imbalance.
So like having employers who are like kind of like preemptively thinking about like, how are my employees, how are my coworkers moving around this space, and like having coworkers who were like, okay, I've got a little bit of positional power here, how can I use this to make my coworkers' lives better when I know it would be heard better coming from me? And that's something that like having had people do that for me is like really important to me. Is like, if I see a coworker at my job being treated unfairly, or like see something in like the kitchen get like that tends to like get them bent out of shape, knowing that like as a man oftentimes people are more willing to listen to me than like my femme and woman counterparts, being able to be like, hey, I've noticed that like we could really fix that problem, eh? Like, a lot of people work in areas that tend toward exploitation and dehumanization, and some of those folks are like, I'm just doing this until like I make it in a creative field. I'm just doing this until I am finished with this certification that's going to let me do this job that I really care about. And some people are like, I've been forced to do this because of racism, because of classism and discrimination in hiring practices, so on and so forth. And some of us are there because we want to be, and because we think that it's important that people do those jobs, and that whether you are working a job that tends towards exploitation and dehumanization, or you in your day-to-day life are profiting from other people working those jobs, whether it's buying your coffee at a coffee shop that a barista makes, or like going to the grocery store where someone is stocking the shelves, those are jobs that like are inherently like full of dignity. Like, that work matters on a fundamental level and is important and is noble. And like, even if you want to do it, being treated poorly doing those kinds of jobs can really weigh on you. And like, it's important that you're doing that work, whether you continue to do it or not. You should be proud of it.
Do you have any advice for other employers that might be wanting to be more aware of this kind of thing?
Prioritize humans and not profit. Yeah.
That's exactly right. It's about respect for humans. I mean, it's not easy, but it's kind of simple. And you can't have a healthy workplace environment where we're spending all of these waking hours if you're not thinking about those workers who are there, and really recognizing that humans deserve to feel belonging and deserve to feel a place where they're part of something. And in fact, we thrive off of that sort of social collaboration. And I think for a long time, a lot of us have been socialized, like I was saying before, to sort of silo, isolate, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And that's something we really want to break down and try to rebuild in a different way where we're utilizing one another as supports. And this is all really important for us to be transparent about because we're teaching the children. They're watching our every move. And it's important to us at Turtle Island that children are going into the world, you know, with ideas about respect and kindness for humans and understanding that other human has a place and has feelings and emotions, you know, and perspective. And if we're asking kids to do that, then we better be doing it ourselves.
Thank you again to Sarah, Nat, Teo, Cecilia, and Vicky for one of my favorite brain clubs ever. It's always so profound to revisit some of these brain club classics after so much time has passed. And thank you for sharing your wisdom and your experiences and have given us a lot to think about. And thank you to all of you for being here and being part of this conversation. And we will be back next week. We'll be joined. We're also going to be looking at another Brain Club classic from around the same time. Revisiting a conversation with Annie Crow, who is a disability and human rights attorney from Australia, who will be revisiting that conversation. And we look forward to you joining us then. Have a good week. Bye.